Well, don't worry about Donald Trump's tariffs much longer, because an 11-judge panel today of the Federal Circuit Court of Appeals, I believe, is about to strike them down. One went up to the Court of International Trade, a little understood, little known specialty court, sits in New York, statute. We call it the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, also called IEPA. Whether he had the power under IEPA to do something that the Constitution says is reserved for Congress. And of course, the answer is there isn't any. And now they focused on emergency. How is this an emergency?
Quick question. If the law doesn't even mention tariffs, can the president suddenly invent them under emergency powers? The appeals court just tore into that idea. And here's the kicker. If they strike it down, the government owes businesses up to $70 billion back. Before we move on, I would like you to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Someone's already figured out how to profit from that giant refund. Not a random someone. We're talking the Commerce Secretary's family. Yeah, you heard me. When is an emergency not really an emergency? Apparently, when it costs $70 billion and the law it's based on doesn't even talk about the thing you're doing. That's the mess we're looking at here. Trump, in full I-can-do-anything mode, decided to use a law called the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEPA, to slap new tariffs on a bunch of imported goods. His big pitch was that this was all part of protecting national security. Sounds serious, right? Only problem is, when you actually read IEPA, it's about sanctions, freezing assets, trade restrictions. Tariffs aren't anywhere in sight. It's like grabbing the rule book for basketball and deciding page 5 gives you the power to add a baseball bat. Here's the thing.
11 judges, and none of them appointed by Donald Trump. I'm going to report on it right here. We had an oral argument for 2 hours today in D.C. on 2 cases related to the attack on Donald Trump's tariffs, some of which may actually go back to his Commerce Secretary's family business because they're betting against the tariffs too. Like another coup-leading president named Bolsonaro, he's not going to be able to go after China. And all that money, all that $50-60 billion that came into the U.S. Treasury. And let's get down to the intersection of law, politics, and tariffs. And we get to this moment. Imposed tariffs. A couple little problems pointed out today in the 11-judge panel.
Congress has traditionally been the one with the keys to the tariff kingdom. They make the rules, they set the rates. And if a president wants to change that, they usually need clear permission. But Trump treated IEPA like some kind of Swiss Army knife. Pull out the emergency blade, and boom, new taxes at the border. It's a bit like declaring a snow day because the weather forecast says partly cloudy, and then sending everyone a bill for using the sidewalk. Sure, it's creative. But is it legal? The Court of International Trade has already had its say, and it wasn't pretty for Team Tariff. They smacked it down, basically saying, nice try, but no. They called it an overreach, a polite legal term for, this isn't in your job description. That decision sent the case up the food chain to the appeals court. Now here's where it gets even more awkward for the former guy. This panel hearing the case? 8 judges appointed by Democrats, 3 by Republicans, and exactly 0 by Trump. Not exactly what you'd call a home field advantage for the orange turd. Inside that courtroom, the questions flying at Trump's lawyers hit right at the foundation of their whole argument. Does the president even have this power without Congress giving it to him in crystal clear language? And even if he does, can national emergency mean whatever a president decides it does? The Major Questions Doctrine says that if you're making a massive policy move, something that's going to hit the economy for billions, you need Congress to have said you can do it in plain English. Vague laws don't cut it. And here, that plain English is missing. No tariffs, no rates, no, go ahead, Mr. President, just nothing. When you look at it this way, the legal foundation isn't just shaky. It's like building a skyscraper on a Jenga tower. And if the appeals court agrees with the lower court, those tariffs could come crashing down faster than Trump's casino empire. That would mean up to $70 billion in refunds to companies that paid the tariffs in the first place. Let's be honest, that's not pocket change. That's the kind of money that makes corporate accountants cry tears of joy. And here's where the fun really starts. Because when that kind of cash is at stake, certain people start seeing dollar signs instead of court rulings. The question is, if all this money goes back out the door, who's lining up at the front of the refund parade? Because, spoiler alert, it's not just the companies who actually paid the tariffs. If this whole scheme collapses, there's a very specific, very connected group that's already positioned to make a fortune off the fallout. And they just happen to be a lot closer to the Trump orbit than you might think. What if the referee in your game wasn't just biased, but secretly had money riding on you losing? That's kind of the picture people are starting to paint here. While everyone's been talking about whether Trump's tariffs were legal, there's this whole side story hiding in plain sight, and it's somehow even messier. It involves Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick's family and a plan that, if true, makes Wall Street look like the kids' table at Thanksgiving. Here's how it's supposed to work. If the courts strike down these tariffs, every business that paid them gets their money back. Pretty simple. Pay a fee you shouldn't have had to pay, get a refund. But here's where it turns into a weird little finance game. Lutnick's family allegedly started snapping up something called refund claims from companies that couldn't or didn't want to wait for the government to pay up. Basically, they'd give those companies a smaller, faster payout up front, and then, if the case goes the right way, collect the full billion-dollar government check later. Now, some businesses probably liked the idea. Court cases take years, and not everyone can hang around while lawyers argue about the definition of emergency. So they sell the right to the refund at a discount. But picture it in everyday terms. It's like your neighbor winning the lottery but not bothering to scratch the ticket, and you offering them $50 for it because you like the design. 2 weeks later, that ticket hits for $1 million. You didn't just win. You finessed your way into profit without ever buying into the game in the first place. On paper, Lutnick had stepped away from all this before joining the Commerce Department. But on paper is the key phrase here. The family connection is still there, the money flow is still close, and to anyone outside that little bubble it looks bad. Like, why is the guy running trade policy in an administration where these refunds are a giant legal question also part of a family that stands to cash in if it goes a certain way? Bad. And let's not forget the timing. This wasn't something that got slapped together after the courts made their first ruling. According to reports, these positions were already being built while the legal fight was heating up. Smart planning? Maybe? Coincidence? Sure, if you believe in unicorns driving Ubers. The point is, we're talking about a potential windfall in the billions here. This isn't like finding some loose change in the couch. This is like taking the whole couch, finding gold bars inside it, and then billing someone else for your moving expenses. If the courts overturn the tariffs, the payouts will flow like water, but not all of it will land in the pockets of the businesses who actually paid the fees. Some is going to go to the people who bought those refund rights cheap and watched their value soar the second the gavel fell. And if those people just happen to be connected to the folks in the room where trade policy was made, well, that's the kind of thing that makes the word conflict feel too polite. So sure, we can argue all day about whether Trump overstepped with his emergency tariffs. But underneath that, there's this whole shadow race for the refund jackpot. And it's a race where the lanes sure look tilted toward the insiders. And now, with the legal fate of the tariffs in the hands of the courts, the stakes have gone way beyond just trade policy. They've landed squarely in the territory of whether the public can trust that the game isn't rigged before it even starts. This whole fight isn't just about tariffs. It's basically a stress test for whether insiders in Washington can place quiet bets on public policy and then cash in while the rest of us watch. If the courts kill these tariffs, billions change hands, and the real question becomes, who's actually pocketing the win? So keep an eye on what the judges do next, and don't just listen to the legal spin. Ask who benefits when $70 billion gets tossed back into the economy. Because in DC, the biggest winners aren't always on stage. They're in the shadows counting their cut.